Good morning. It's a pleasure for me. It's an honor. It's an honor to follow Ricardo in this presentation. With Ricardo, we worked jointly in Escondida. And an anecdote that is very interesting is that a hill that didn't have much mineralization was called Ricardo Hill. And today that is part of the mine. That means that things progress, the grades decrease, and we have new discoveries. There we have Ricardo Hill, and Ricardo Hill is now part of Escondida mine. Now, the subject that I have to deal with in this opportunity is Argentinian copper. Copper in Argentina, and some questions about this ore, this material that in reality it's a metal discovered in Argentina, identified in the country, but that has not had the development nor the funding to develop it. And at this moment, I believe it is the key time for the mining country to progress towards a new stage of the mining consolidation of the country. An Argentinian flag, and let's go to see the word copper production. In the 1900s, shortly after the beginning of industrial revolution, worldwide production in copper was 435 million tons. Today, 110 years later, we have 6,000 fine copper, tons of fine copper production. It has grown. We can observe a relatively moderate growth at the beginning that is somehow obliterated by special circumstances like wars and afterwars periods, stagnations, major crises, and other events. So this is the world production of copper during the last century and part of this century. Now we ask ourselves, which are the main sources of copper? And obviously it is yet the copper coming from the mines, industrial scrap, electronic scrap, and construction. The sub-economic mining deposits, those that time ago Lingen defined as big deposits, big copper deposits with big volumes, with low grades of copper close to 3%. Now we can talk about 0.1%. We also have deep resources that are hidden below sediments or simply below the iron cover, the ice cover. Important resources are the nodules of manganese and copper in the ocean, and mainly in the Pacific Ocean. Which is the source of mining production? The porphyries of Chile, Argentina, Peru, and Ecuador. First, we have to say that the porphyries, the geological conditions of the fire belt of the Pacific, or the circum-Pacific belt. And among them we have some centers that are more active, that have greater production and more potential, like the Chile porphyries Argentina, Peru, Ecuador porphyries to a certain extent. The North American porphyries, the Central American porphyries, the Philippines and Indonesia porphyries. The other side of the Pacific, Papua New Guinea, East Australia, and some in New Zealand. And we continue then with a big alignment of copper from China and decreasing towards East Europe. That is quite important in countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and all those countries that with funny names that are difficult to pronounce. We already have, and they have been mined in many sectors of Germany, the Kirchhofer deposits with the copper mantles, and that they're still producing in Poland. The copper belt of Katanga, Zambia, in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia. They have been for a long time, for many years, they have been nominated as the Green Rocks of Katanga. And an astonishing amount of mineralization that happily, after many years of political problems, many years with infrastructure problems, they have been able to enter in production, they have been able to develop. And lately we have gold and iron, copper and gold in Australia, in Chile, in Peru, and in many parts of the world. The resources and copper potential, the potential of copper deposits in Argentina is well known from the 60s. It happens in an environment, in a geological environment that is highly favorable. In 1997, Argentina enters to the club of copper producers with a Bajo de la Lumbrera, and it was identified and it was confirmed the existence of other deposits: Alumbrera, Taca-Taca, Campana Maguira, El Pachón, José María, San Jorge, El Altar, Los Azules, Famatina, and among many others that we could mention. In spite a dozen of gold and silver mines were started and put in action in Argentina in the last 13-14 years, copper mines were not opened after La Lumbrera, and this is a subject for analysis. Nevertheless, slowly, Argentinian mining grows and progresses. We see a small map of the reserves and resources, geological reserves and resources of the world. At the left, we have the reserves. And in honor to the respect for the other speakers and hurrying up, we can say that in this word, according to the Geological Service of the United States, we have 542 billion tons of copper as reserves. We are not going to define what are reserves and what are resources, because you understand it. Resources, the resources. Well, there are resources that have been discussed. But if we add reserves as resources, and if we are concerned about the resources that remain in the United States, what is remaining in South America and the rest of the world, and what remains in the nodules, in the manganese nodules of the sea, manganese copper, of course, manganese copper nodules of the sea bottom, we would have 6 billion tons, 6.1 billion tons, and that is a big challenge, with a great challenge for mining it, and it is the future of copper in the planet. Let's talk about copper in Argentina. Starting in the year 1990, when we were looking for gold in this area, new mines appeared. New gold mines appeared, and in the second green circle of the left, in the year 1997, Alumbrera mine was opened. After that, all the other red points we can see in the map are gold-silver deposits, mainly gold and silver. And what we can see with all the progress, and we can see with all the discovery, plus, and besides the discovery, the resources that have been identified, we think that in the year 2020 we might have 30 mines in operation in Argentina, from a country that in 30 years raises in 30 mines. It is an idea, it is a concept that means a great promise. Favorable environment for copper mining in Argentina. The greatest copper deposit in Argentina are encompassed in what we call porphyry coppers, characterized by great volumes and by relatively low grades of copper. But besides that, they present a content, a moly content, a gold content, and in some cases silver. And they are grouped in the provinces, in the geological provinces of the west of Andean range, and in the north part of the country. We will not continue with this list. We have some geological factors that in this presentation are not necessary to mention. Other type of genesis are also not included in this presentation. But let's stop for a minute and wonder and ask ourselves if the copper market is a valid option for Argentina. What is the historical production, global historical production of copper? We answered that question already. Where does the primary copper production come from? We also answered that question. What is a local production of copper? We haven't answered that. Who answered it just half of it. And which are the reserves and resources, the copper reserves and resources, the global, both global and local, and what are the conditions for the modern mining development in Chile? We have the sustainable growth for the copper mining in Argentina. I'll try to answer those questions. We put all the information, the new information, old information, with different grades, with different cutoff grades, and we arrived to the conclusion that transforming this into a present currency, present dollars, Argentina talking about porphyry copper and having into account that there is copper, that there is copper content, that there is moly, that there, in many cases there is gold, and in many cases there is silver, we would have a resource, an economic resource of about 330,000 billion tons. I'm not, well, in Spanish it's 1,000 millions. I cannot say billions. It's 1,000 million. In English, it's a billion. In the US, we would call them 330 billion. This includes the reserves. This is calculated in pesos and in American dollars. If we thought about, if we think what kind of deposit, what kind of genetic unit are the basis for the mineral resources of the country and making the economic transformations needed, we could say that 85% of this income comes from copper porphyries and copper deposits, and only zinc and lead stratiform deposits from now on
6%,
represent 6%, including the big Navidad deposit in the south of the country. And that the sedimentaries and the epithermals have gold and silver, like Cerro, Vanguardia, Veladero, Lama, Gualcamayo are included there because we have and included there because there are some discrepancies, and they represent an 8%. And uranium contained in the deposits in Sierra Pintada and Cerro Solo represent only 1%. Only 1%. This is 330 billion tons of copper, of ore. Let's focus the analysis in a different manner. The stratiform deposits, the silver, lead, and zinc stratified deposits added to the epithermals of gold and silver can match the single deposit in exploitation in the group of the copper porphyries. We find that the 43% of the value of these ores represent or is represented in Bajo de la Lumbrera. So we have to pay attention. We have to give importance to the copper deposits. If we think of world copper production, where Chile out of any scheme to make this slide more presentable, is producing almost 6 billion tons, and very soon, very fast, it drops to 1 billion tons with Russia, Australia, Indonesia, China, United States, and Peru. Argentina represents 1/5 of that last figure, with one only deposit. Then to end, I see a paradox here. The important expectations for copper resources in Chile, in Argentina, attract investors, but no mining operation have been opened since 1937. Why, having big copper deposits, we don't produce more in Argentina? The last deposit was opened in 1997. Yes, it is true, we have a big taxes, and we have provinces that stop mining activities. It is true that putting in action a copper mine represents high investments, and that few Argentinian companies in high-risk projects are. There are few Argentinian companies in high-risk projects, and we need an important social license to operate. Now, if we go back to the previous slide, and we keep the values, and create this column to the right, where if everything or a part of half of the deposits of copper discovered from the 60s on could be mined or could be in exploitation in the next 5 or up to 10 years, we could compete very, very strongly with Peru, United States, Russia, and Australia. It's interesting. This is an interesting point. The resources, copper resources in Argentina are important. And we have given very little importance to them. It's true, we cannot compare at this moment. We cannot compare ourselves with the production, the resources, and the reserves of Chile. But we can compete with the United States, with Peru and China, among others, depending on the government, depending on the response of the companies, depending on the capacity for funding, and the being able of developing Argentinian copper mining that with adequate technology and to advance pushing towards the future of mining development in Argentina. The truth is that we should not forget the other commodities that represent Argentina. It's true, but copper, ladies and gentlemen, copper represents an opportunity, an important one, and it's not being given the importance it has in our country. And sorry, I say our country because I consider it my country, our country. Thank you very much.